In my life, there have been a handful of films that have become true cultural phenomena. However, nothing compares to the absolute hysteria around Batman in 1989. And although it happened before I was born, Star Wars certainly became an unprecedented cultural phenomenon. And I promise, I'll try to use other words, but frankly, there aren't any other words that are as fitting. Star Wars absolutely took over the world, and our collective consciousness. However, at least to the audience, and probably to movie studios, Star Wars kind of came out of nowhere. Although we being society, and not we being me because I wasn't born yet, the collective we experienced that anticipation with The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi.
Wow, what an ending! Who'd have thought Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father?
Aw, thank you! Thank you, Mr. Blow the Picture for me.
And although, according to family legend, I was at Return of the Jedi in 1983, part of that legend involves a leaking diaper. So I really can't speak to the phenomena of any of the original Star Wars films. I can speak to the anticipation of the then unnamed Episode 1.
Wait a minute, George! I'm training these guys as Jedis, and they're not very good.
We all know that we rushed to Walmarts and Toys R Us to buy pallets full of Star Wars toys that are now worth less than we paid for them in 1999. A busting collector bubble aside, the anticipation was real. I even went to my good friend Watson's house, check out our video on Bottle Rocket, and we watched the trailer over and over again in the lowest resolution you can imagine, over dial-up. When I didn't even know you could watch trailers like that before this movie trailer. Maybe you couldn't, I'm not sure. This was the first one I ever experienced like that. Before reaction videos and Easter egg breakdown videos, Watson and I spent hours and then the weeks and months after that speculating on what we might see in this film. And I even went to see A Bug's Life just to watch the trailer for Episode 1. Bug's Life is more than just the black sheep of Pixar films. It also had a section of theme park leveled for a high-end Six Flags show featuring the Avengers. But what was the first film that got people going to see another movie just to see the trailer for a different movie?
I'm Batman.
People actually called to find out what time the Batman trailer was showing, went to see other movies, and then left those movies after watching the trailer. And first, the dark side of any phenomena. That's right, us. Geeks en masse. It just seems casting of Batman and around Batman is always divisive. Edward Cullen as Batman? Bennifer as Batman? Even the casting of the villains creates an uproar. The guy from that movie based on The Taming of the Shrew with Julia Stiles as the Joker?
And the Oscar goes to Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight.
Rest in peace, Heath Ledger. Now, the first time this backlash happened, it was well before internet complaining was an everyday part of our lives. Up to this point, Michael Keaton, a native of Pittsburgh, who my good friend Josh got to meet in high school via some Pittsburgh Youth Filmmakers Program thing, was mostly known as a comedic actor, and he even did stand-up before all this. The world had no idea he could be so brooding and terrifying, and now for an entire generation of people.
I'm going to leave you with these two words. And those two words are, I'm Batman.
He is, was, and will always be Batman. You have to understand, people actually petitioned against him being Batman, and I mean petitioned the old-fashioned way. They actually had to write petitions and send letters, not just hit autofill after clicking a link. The petition reads, "It has been recently announced that the actor Michael Keaton has been chosen to play the Batman in the big-budget film being directed by Tim Beetlejuice Burton for release in 1989, the 50th anniversary of The Batman. If the producers of this movie are truly committed to leaving the camp image of the 60s TV show behind and presenting to the world the definitive Dark Knight detective, they can't allow Michael Keaton to play this role. Don't get me wrong, Keaton is a fine comedy actor who has done exemplary work in the past in such films as Beetlejuice, Mr. Mom, Night Shift, etc. But he's definitely not the sort of imposing figure needed to define the ultimate creature of the night, the Batman. Help us stop this ridiculous decision before filming starts in September '88. Sign the petition below and let's bring the folks at Warner Brothers Films to their senses." We, the undersigned, strongly insist that the decision to cast Michael Keaton as the Batman is a major mistake and must be reversed before filming starts on Batman the movie. Even producer Michael Uslan thought his casting was a joke when he first heard about it. I had now spent 7 years of my life to bring a dark, serious Batman to the screen, and it was like all my hopes and dreams were going up in smoke.
When I first heard it, to be frank, I thought it was a weird idea. It seemed totally out of left field to me.
The press also clearly didn't get it. The article begins by mentioning that Robin is dead. It should be noted, the same fans that petitioned against Michael Keaton likely also killed poor Jason Todd. The man who made The Dark Knight truly dark, Frank Miller, said, "Killing Robin should be singled out as the most cynical thing DC has ever done. An actual toll-free number where fans can call in to put the axe to a little boy's head." Mueller was being optimistic, saying it was a toll-free number when casting your vote to kill Robin actually cost you 50 cents. Truth be told, I'm a Tim Drake guy. The article by Kathleen Hughes says, "The Cape Crusader may turn out to be a wimp. Warner cavalierly ignored their advice to cast a serious macho type. Michael Keaton is no Sylvester Stallone." Imagine him as Batman. I guarantee you, those Robin bloodthirsty fans had no interest in Stallone as Batman. The article goes on to insult Mr. Keaton's size, called him weak chin, and pointed out his receding hairline. The fans didn't want an average guy in a suit, but Tim Burton did. Beyond that, he wanted an actor you could believe would put on that suit.
Exactly, so I didn't want to blow it.
Burton said, "I met with a number of very good square-jawed actors, but bottom line was that I just couldn't see any of them putting on a bat suit." One fan said, "Hollywood is just in it for the money. I don't think Mr. Burton has any intention of making a serious Batman movie." Tim Burton even said that the trailer was released to help stop some of that talk about a campy Batman. This also speaks to a current issue with adult fans, me included. We think we own everything because we used to play with the toys as kids. That fan added, "Batman has been part of everyone's childhood. He deserves a bit of respect." Weirdly, some of these fans were actually against Jack Nicholson's casting as the Joker because he was too funny. Hadn't they seen The Shining? And just about every other Jack Nicholson movie up to that point? Even when he's funny, he's still scary. The article goes on to ask, how can a movie about a man who dresses up in a bat costume to fight crime not be funny? It goes on to insult the broad strokes of the plot, including the Joker killing people by causing them to laugh to death. The article mercifully ends by noting the comics, via graphic novels, have become grimmer, saying, of The Dark Knight Returns, Gotham City is under attack by a gang called the Mutants, who have killed 3 nuns and are suspected of stapling a cat to the door of a church. As if that's what the story's about! The fans may have been dead wrong, but unlike Kathleen Hughes, they understood Batman and respected comics as an art form. But let's travel back in time to well before I was born, before I was peeing in my diaper in Return of the Jedi, when Batman was born. Batman first appeared in Detective Comics number 27 in 1939. Bob Kane and Bill Finger's creation instantly had an impact on popular culture, including a possible influence in one of the greatest and most important films ever made. Rosebud. Yes, Rosebud.
It's Citizen Kane.
No, that's not it.
Legend has it, Orson Welles took inspiration from the comic book for the dramatic angles he shot the film. Welles literally had trenches dug in the studio floor to get those dramatic low-angle shots. But even if the comic didn't influence Welles, both were influenced by German Expressionism. Regardless, it came full circle with Tim Burton's Batman film. Citizen Kane and early movie serials aside, Batman's cultural impact was mostly relegated to comic books, until Lorenzo Semple Jr. brought the camp in the 1960s. I personally knew Lorenzo Semple Jr., although I didn't know him well. I knew the guy and got to meet him several times. He was a brilliant man, a great writer, and had seen it all in Hollywood over decades. However, he had no respect for comic books whatsoever, and saw them as campy kid stuff. I kind of got into minor arguments with him. I was very respectful, but I just kept questioning it. He just didn't get how I saw comic books. Which is okay, because the Batman series is good for what it was. Ironically, his 70s spy thrillers, The Parallax View and 3 Days of the Condor, influenced what is arguably still the best Marvel Cinematic Universe film, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Mr. Semple Jr., do you say the Junior?
No, Daddy. No, Daddy.
Anyway, he was right about Batman, at least for the time. And as a kid in the late 80s and early 90s, I loved it, and I still love it for what it is. While it was goofy and utterly absurd, it made Batman culturally relevant and has had a lasting impact. However, aside from it and some slightly less goofy cartoon versions,
you might have to press and push up more than once. Try it again. It's important to get it right. Someone's life may depend on it.
Adam West's portrayal was the most influential version we had.
I fooled you.
However, we wanted a serious take on Batman. Maybe these days we take him a little too seriously?
I'm vengeance.
In the 1970s, George Lucas, despite his indie mindset, perfected the modern blockbuster, meaning a mega huge film with tons of toys and stuff for kids to buy. Despite the fact that nobody wanted to make the toys for Star Wars, a year after the movie came out, when we finally had Star Wars toys, the first superhero became the first superhero movie. While it certainly didn't open the floodgates, it did open the door. Now keep in mind, in the 1980s, superhero movies, that wasn't a genre unto itself. And no, Howard the Duck and Swamp Thing do not count, at least not for our purposes. The two movies that made it a genre were Superman and Batman over a decade later. We can mostly just ignore any Superman sequels and spin-offs.
Mostly.
In 1979, with the door open just a crack, Michael Uslan stuck his foot in and acquired the rights to Batman. In the early 1970s, while studying at Indiana University School of Law, Bloomington, Uslan took over Roger Stern's course, The Comic Book Hero. He brought a more academic approach, and it became an officially accredited course. The first of its kind, actually. So kind of think my YouTube channel, but with a peer-reviewed textbook. The course and the textbook, both now called The Comic Book in America, or possibly The Comic Book in Society, made Mr. Uslan a bit of a celebrity, or perhaps a curiosity, for taking funny books seriously. Mr. Uslan did plenty of work worthy of other conversations. Dino saucers, anyone? But the short version is, the lawyer, comic book fan turned comic book professor, and aspiring producer acquired the rights to Batman in 1979. Uslan, with a writing partner, took the first crack at a darker, grittier Batman, featuring a middle-aged Batman coming out of retirement. The Dark Knight returns when Frank Miller was just starting out on Daredevil. After struggling to find a producer, Uslan found Peter Guber and John Peters. John Peters is actually this guy, although apparently he was a hairstylist, which is kind of my family business, so we can't be all crazy. The movie was officially announced in July 1980 at the Comic Art Convention in New York. Guber and Peters were two very strong personalities, and in 1981, they got Warner Brothers on board for a property the studio had sold the rights away to 2 years earlier.
Warner's actually owned DC Comics. They could have made it anytime they wanted to.
As do many big projects in Hollywood, it went through various iterations and different creative teams in its development process. The weirdest potential iteration would have come from Ivan Reitman and featured Bill Murray as Batman and Eddie Murphy as Robin. Now, if any of that got beyond just being an idea, I don't know. Joe Dante may or may not have been hired to direct, but he, Robert Zemeckis, and the all-father of comic book movies, Richard Donner, were all approached to direct with a script by Superman and 70s Bond writer Tom Mankiewicz. Mankiewicz's script was structurally like Superman, i.e. a prototypical superhero origin story in chronological order, but dark and serious. Tom's dad, Joseph, was a prolific filmmaker in his own right, but Tom's uncle, Herman, actually wrote Rosebud. Yes, Rosebud.
Paper. Look! Citizen Kane! It was Citizen Kane! It was Citizen Kane! It was Citizen Kane!
This version was scheduled for a 1985 release. 1985 came and went. And a kid who was just too weird for Disney was eventually brought onto the project. Tim Burton may have been too weird for Disney, but he was the perfect amount of weird for Warner Brothers. First, with the success of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I still cannot look at the screen during the Large Marge scene, and I know the Kyoto brothers who did that effect. Before being officially hired to direct, Burton and then-girlfriend Julie Hitchson were brought on to develop the screenplay. Of course, fans at the time hated the idea, and although he wasn't on the project at this point, he was hovering around it. As Tim Burton said, they were just waiting to see how Beetlejuice did. They didn't want to give me that movie unless Beetlejuice was going to be okay. They wouldn't say that, but that was really the way it was. Giving fans another reason to be upset, Tim Burton was not a comic book fan, but he was interested more in an aesthetic point of view. Tim Burton also said, "I was never a giant comic book fan, but I've always loved the image of Batman and the Joker." He also went on to say that he didn't know how to read a comic book, meaning where to read in the panel, saying that maybe it was dyslexia. Now, as someone who suffers from very mild dyslexia, comic books were actually how I learned how to read. Burton did say the first comic book he could understand, the first one that he actually loved, was The Killing Joke. Unlike Burton, screenwriter Sam Hamm begged to be brought on the project. Hamm brought a deep love for the character and knowledge of the comic through his 5 revisions of the script. With Beetlejuice's success, it all became official, and Burton begged to bring Beetlejuice himself on as Batman. We've already discussed this backlash, and while clearly in retrospect it's all wrong, let's be fair to those reactionary fans at the time. 1. You hire the guy who directed the Pee Wee Herman movie. B. He insisted on bringing Mr. Mama's Batman? Give me a pen and paper. I'm writing a letter to Warner Brothers. My dearest Warner Brothers, I must express my dismay over the creative decisions you're making on this film. Batman is a character who deserves the most serious consideration and cinematic execution. We must not let the guy who did that Frankenweenie short and Johnny Dangerously steal away the spirit and fail the creative vision. Sincerely, Private Josiah Daniel Goldie, September 1988. As the script was written and rewritten again and again, including shoehorning Robin in, only to be eliminated later. Incidentally, Batfleck actually auditioned for the part, and the last-minute removal of Robin happened again in Batman Returns. Marlon Wayans wasn't in Batman Returns, but he got a toy, albeit with a complexion a bit more like mine than his. This is one of my all-time favorite toys. He even got paid, and apparently still gets residuals. I want the agent and the lawyer who negotiated that contract. But what was the final missing element?
Wait till they get a load of me.
Apparently Jack was their first choice, with Michael Uslan even coloring a promo image from The Shining with Joker colors. Other actors were considered for the part. Famously, Robin Williams really wanted it, but was only used as leverage to get Jack to sign. With Burton's visual flair, Danny Elfman's now iconic score, and Anton Furst's neo-noir production design, we had not just a Batman movie, but one that was ready to become a cultural phenomenon. Now, as we mentioned, Star Wars laid the groundwork. It set the stage, whatever you want to say, but it built that template, it's another version, for what became the modern blockbuster. Meaning a huge movie that takes over every aspect of a kid's life, from your bedding to your toy collection to what you eat. Throughout the 1980s, various movie properties tried to become a phenomenon like Star Wars, but nothing even came close until Tim Burton's Batman. I mentioned that to see the episode 1 trailer, I went and watched A Bug's Life. I went to Watson's house and watched it on his dial-up modem. But what would I have done in the 1980s had I been just a bit older? I'd have gone to other movies to see the trailer. I'd have purchased bootleg footage via mail order catalog, I guess. And I would have stolen posters from bus stops. Those posters went with a style similar to that of Superman from 11 years earlier. With Superman, Christopher Reeves wasn't yet a star, so they were selling the fact that you could see Superman in a movie and you could see Superman fly, not see Christopher Reeves as Superman, but you'd see Superman. With Batman, the BD Fox agency similarly focused on the iconic Batman logo. The money made on merchandise alone was estimated between $500 and $750 million. Even the novelization became a bestseller, as did the soundtrack by Prince, which was also my first Prince album. I ordered it from BMG thinking I was getting the Danny Elfman score. Thanks to our collective desire for a serious take on Batman, a general yearning for superhero cinema, coupled with an absolutely brilliant marketing campaign, Batmania had arrived. DC even launched a brand new, darker, early in his career comic book, Batman Legends of the Dark Knight. Not long after, another book, Shadows of the Bat. In 1990, 6,000 new comic shops opened. The escalation that would grow and eventually crash horribly in the mid-90s, with Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, and Jim Lee, among many others, was started by Batman. The film opened at $43 million, breaking records recently set by Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which actually had a 3-day weekend, so it cheated. It then broke second-week records and was the first film to pass $100 million in 10 days. 1989 was an absolutely loaded year at the movies. From the beginning of the Disney Renaissance with The Little Mermaid, sequels to Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, and the aforementioned Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade was the only movie in 1989 to make more money than Batman worldwide. And And it had Indiana Jones and James Bond in one movie. I was 7 in 1989, which, if you do the math, means I'm really old now. But then, now, and forever, Batman appeals to kids. Meaning it made more money than Indy overall thanks to home video sales. I got my copy for Christmas in 1989. I don't think I ever saw the movie before Christmas Day, although it's possible we rented it, which for us means we got it for free from family who owned a video store, likely in exchange for free haircuts. However, I'm sure I didn't see it in the theater. Batman became the biggest movie of 1989 and arguably the biggest movie of the 1980s because it came home with us. Warner Brothers actually priced it cheaper than other videos at the time, meaning my mom was way more likely to buy it. She and every other mom spent a whopping $150 million on them. It came home with us. In multiple ways. From the home video to toys. Granted, the initial toy line could have been better. I mean, you had one good guy and two bad guys, and one of those bad guys was Bob the Goon. As a kid, I remember seeing a whole lot of Bob the Goons left on shelves. Not unlike the modern Lando Calrissian figures. Heck, we could have used a Lando figure, Harvey Dent, or Commissioner Gordon, or Random Cop. Anybody. The line did have an amazing Batcave playset that got reused over and over again, and two awesome vehicles. And Toy Biz would eventually expand it with the DC Superheroes line.
Toy Biz, and now bring all the action of Batman home with the Batmobile, action figures, and more. Each sold separately from Toy Biz.
Adding figures that appear to be reverse-engineered versions of Kenner's far superior Superpowers line from a few years earlier. Eventually, we did get a really cool Joker van. I had it when it was redecorated as a Punisher van, when Toy Biz moved on to Marvel like a year later.
Marvel superheroes are each sold separately from Toy Biz.
My brother Jake took a piece of wood and used it as a ramp on a big pile of dirt, took that Punisher van, pushed it as hard as he could up off that ramp, and it shattered on the other side. But before that van exploded, I, like every other kid in 1989, had the black sweatshirt with the bright yellow Batman logo on the chest, or maybe the version with the Joker, which I also had. Most kids had a Toy Biz figure or two, although some got stuck with Bob.
You are my number one guy. Yes, sir.
Some of us bought ours on a Saturday morning before our weekly visit to Grandma's in the Trona Heights, only later that day to have our brother Jake take that Batman, attempt to have him swing from the spiral staircase across to the kitchen, to fall and instantly break his leg off. But that was Batmania. Batman was home with us. And he still is. Maybe he didn't have a leg. Mine didn't. What are you still doing here? You watch all the way to the end? Well, I guess if you do, write in the comments who your favorite Batman is and why. As long as you're subscribed to this channel, maybe I'll send you a copy of Batman here.